My name is Subramani, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this episode of Regal LinkedIn Live Series week after week. Our aim is to enable coaches like you and many others may join in future to build a prosperous coaching business and be the coach who you would want to be, right? And this kind of connects very well with the ethos of Regal Unlimited, where we are looking at seeking excellence and mastery as a leader, and which we deliver through our coaching programs and coach training programs. So I have with me today Rekha. Uh, just a very quick introduction to Rekha. She's an executive and leadership coach, though she prefers to call herself a life coach because she believes that all coaching is about a person's life. And 4,000 hours and counting, Rekha.
Yes,
And yeah, she's also a
counting.
coach trainer. Yeah, 100 plus coaches trained for their credentials, ACC and PCC. Also, a coach mentor, a team coach, coach supervisor with credentials and accreditations from ICF and MCC. I'll run out of alphabets. So, welcome, Rekha.
Thank you, Mani, and hi, everyone. So nice. I don't know how many of
Right.
you are here, but I'm hoping that there are a number of you over there listening. So, my privilege to be here speaking on something that I think I'm passionate about and I love doing. Thanks, Mani, for the intro.
Wonderful. So, also a quick message to all the viewers: if you're joining this series for the first time, do check out the earlier episodes as well. Right.
Yeah.
So, what we are going to talk about, Rekha, today is something which is very close to you. If coming from your experience as a coach, trainer, and mentor. So, what does really coach development beyond coach training involve? So, any initial thoughts?
Yeah. So it's even before we go into beyond training, it might be useful to know, what is development all about, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when we talk about, let's say when L&D in organizations, when people talk about learning and development and growth, what is actually development? So for me, development is about areas of development. Yeah, one is how do you look at your mindset, and when we talk
Mhm.
about a coaching mindset, for instance, right, that's a core competency in the ICF framework. So, how do you develop a coaching mindset and how do you live the coaching mindset in life and not just when you're coaching a client? How do you keep yourself updated on knowledge, on tools, on techniques, on the changes that are happening in the environment right now with AI coming in and so on? So how do you keep abreast of all of that? And then how do you keep your the axe sharpened, as you say, right? How do you keep practicing skills so that you become more and more proficient as a coach? So
Yeah.
when I think about that as development, then definitely the scope is way beyond just classroom training.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel that that is very important for budding coaches to know, because they shouldn't get into this feeling that, okay, I have gone through classroom training and then the job is done. And now here I am as a coach and now I can rest on my laurels, so to say. It doesn't work like that.
Hmm. So I pick up a couple of interesting points from what you're saying, even though you didn't mention them specifically. So you're talking about some kind of a continuity, right, from classroom training and then going on to coach development. So it's kind of a never-ending process.
Yeah.
And then we are talking about the contrast between classroom training and development, because you talked about mindset, which is
Yeah.
more self-driven, I would say, right, as compared to imparting something. And obviously, you're also talking about beyond competencies and skills when you say part of life. So,
Yes.
how do you see them, coming together for a coach who's journeying from the stage of finishing classroom training, moving on to, say, credentials and then self development?
Hmm. So let's backtrack a little bit and let's look at what happens in a classroom, right? So you have a notion that you want to become a coach for some reason, and the reasons are unimportant. Everyone has their own reasons for wanting to become a coach, and so you choose a training school and you do your whatever due diligence and you get into a training program. Now a training program is a structured thing, so there is a structure to it, there is a start and the finish to it, there is a there is a regularity in the classroom that happens, there is a curriculum, and then that is delivered over a period of time, and then you have assignments. Think about it as education. And
Yeah.
incidentally, just to let everyone know in case they don't, that ICF is now moving away from a training focus more to an education focus. So as we know, all of us have been through education, so we know education is about knowledge dissemination. So that is what happens in a training program. There is info shared, there is knowledge shared, there is content delivered. And it's more like, okay, I'm the trainer or I'm the teacher and I give you something because I'm in a position to give you that. And then you accept it and then you apply it. So that's what happens in a classroom setting, in a structured training program. And in the case of coach training, for instance, we also do observed practice
Yeah.
uh, of the coaching process, right? That's what happens. And then
Hmm.
you're moving on your own, you're moving towards a credential. Why credential? Because that develops, meaning gives you credibility, of course. There is a standard that is being followed. So there is a method to it. You're not just doing something random off the cuff. It's a
Right.
tested methodology, so it can be believed. It's more believable. So you're working towards a credential, and then after the training, you're on your own.
Hmm.
So when you're on your own now, when there is no formal structure of a training program available to you, how do you take responsibility now and ownership now of keeping yourself updated and developing on an ongoing basis? So how do you make sure that you're sharpening your skills? How do you make sure that you're um, accessing knowledge from different sources? How do you make sure that you're practicing the competencies, right? When we talk about mindset and when we talk about living the life of a coach, it's not limited to what you do in a coaching session. It's about your interactions in day-to-day life, in your with your
Yeah.
in different relationships, right? At home, in your social networks, in your professional networks, and so on. How are you listening?
Hmm.
How are you demonstrating empathy? How are you demonstrating presence, for instance? And then how that is impacting your environment. So I believe that, Mani, when we step out of the training school, it becomes more a systemic thing. Like, I am now living in an environment and I need to operate in that environment, and in that environment now I need to develop my mindset and
Hmm.
keep it sharpened.
Very interesting that you are talking about coaching as not being just in a coaching session, and how do you be the coach and you
Yeah.
don't do the coaching, right? That's a very interesting contrast, and something which kind of popped up for me is, we talked about credentials. There is a rigor in the process. People go
Yeah.
through certain training. There is a amount of practice you do, the number of sessions. uh, Sometimes it may happen that we may mistake it and say that we have arrived because we've got credentials.
Yeah.
It's kind of a feeling that, yeah, now I don't need to keep learning. While the credentials, I feel credentials are more of minimum acceptable standards, right, rather than the maximum ones. So how does a coach remain more cognizant of this and continue that learning?
Hmm. So, it strangely reminds me of an analogy, Mani. It's like many people feel that, getting married is the end. And you'll find even in movies, right? They got married and then they lived happily ever after. But that's not how it is. That's the start. It's the
Yeah.
start of the journey, actually. So for me, the training program is the nascent stage. Credential is start of the journey, right?
Hmm.
And in fact, I remember my mentor saying that, when I became MCC, she said that you have just got the credential, but now you will start becoming MCC.
Hmm.
So it's about Why should we do that? It's because that is how we are going to add, if we are going to be professional coaches, right? um, it means that we are going to be adding value to our clients. It means that we are going to add value to our clients ecosystems. It means that we are
Hmm.
going to add value to our ecosystem. It means that we are going to add value to ourselves, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
And right, and so that cannot happen overnight, or it cannot happen just let me finish it off in 1 month. It's a, to me it is a forever journey, and I can
Hmm.
never say it's done. Like, I can say a credential is done, I can never say this is done, because I have no idea what's next, right? And we talk about
True.
maximizing potential. That is what is coaching all about. So how are we maximizing our potential as a coach, for that matter?
Hmm.
How do we know that what is our potential? How do we know how much it is? So there's no end to it, no?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a very open-ended question, right? In true spirit of coaching, what
Yeah.
exactly is potential? And something which you mentioned earlier, in terms of when you said tools, right? So one part of it is how deeper you want to go and how broader. So a lot of times the question comes is what does that development entail really, in terms of, you did touch upon it, and just couple of thoughts. That one is obviously you can become more credentialed, right? That's what we call as deeper. So okay, I've got ACC, I'll go for PCC, and then ACTC, MCC, all those things. The other could be broader as well, right? So what is it that I'm adding to what I have already got as a coach? It could be other disciplines, integrating them, skills. And then the third component of being the human, the coach, in all ways of life.
Yeah.
When you look at all three, uh, where can training help in this, in development?
So training is one component. It's one methodology, right, Mani? If I'm talking about developing, and if I'm talking about this journey, like you're saying about being, it's not about acquiring credentials. If it's only about acquiring credentials, then yes, I do that through training programs which are mandated for the purpose of credentialing, right? Um, it reminds me of our Indian way of, when do we stop? So we do graduation, post graduation, and then we do a doctorate, and then sometime we say, now somebody has capped it, so we cap it. So that is one way to do.
Yeah.
But if that is not done in the true spirit of learning, right, then you might get a higher level credential, but you may not live that credential. You know,
Hmm.
so you may have gotten a PCC, but you are not a PCC in that sense, right?
Hmm.
So then where does training help? If I'm going to if I want to pick up some specific skill, or if I want to pick up some specific tool or a technique, I go to training. If I want to pick up knowledge, like you talked about, peripheral, supportive,
Yeah.
it's about deepening beyond competencies, right? Because the framework gives us only a set of 8 competencies, and there's only that much you can do in terms of deepening those. But then we need to add on around it.
Hmm.
So if I'm talking about adding on around it, let's say I go and I do some study of psychology, or I study spirituality, or I study, let's say, NLP or transactional analysis, or other bodies of knowledge which are going to be useful to me as a coach, then I need to acquire that knowledge. So then I need to go the education way. Now, if I need to build skills in those, then I need to go into training in those areas. So
Hmm.
for me, training is a kind of a starter, but it's not enough. So you can
Yeah.
start with training, and then you need to go beyond that,
Right. So
right?
all these could be triggers to help you move on another path, add on to it, and then you
Yes.
keep doing more of it. And at some point of time, programs like Coaching Unlimited, like what we do, probably helps deepen those, the coaching skills which you've got, or to refresh them in a way.
Exactly.
Like I was recalling last week, I'd taken a almost 2 month break from coaching, and when I came back, I felt rusty. So that's
Yeah.
when you need to get back, sharpen your saw again.
Yeah.
So thanks for that input. So how do you look at coaches being able to do this? Because many of them who become successful, they start getting clients, they have got a good practice going. Some point of time you may feel you don't really need it now because I'm doing it day in day out,
Yeah,
right? So how do I keep that awareness intact, and what do I do to keep developing?
yeah. That's an interesting point, right? One is about rustiness. So we don't want to gather rust, and we don't want to get atrophied either, right? I mean, you don't use it for a long period of time, it will just drop off, like how atrophy happened to us as human beings. Um, so how do you keep doing that? Another thing is, Mani, you talked about, okay, now I'm a successful coach and I'm doing coaching, I'm getting clients, so I don't need to do anything more. Well, that's how businesses go out of business, right? If you
Hmm.
get if you are complacent, and if you feel that you have arrived and therefore you will, it will be a continuity, well, you need to check that assumption, because it's not going to work that way, right? Somebody else will come and steal your clients, then what are you going to do? So how are you all the time going to look at creating, either you create differentiators for yourself, or you look at integration. Personally, for me, I integration as a concept and even in theory and practice appeals to me more than differentiation. So how do you integrate everything in the service of your client? How do you integrate everything that you have towards? And therefore, when I'm talking about integration, I need to keep accumulating more. That is one
Hmm.
angle. Other is, think about it. I mean, if you're continuously coaching clients the same way, wouldn't you want to refresh? Wouldn't you want to look at doing it differently? Wouldn't you want to bring in some innovation, something inventive in your
Yeah.
approach, your methodology, in your techniques, in the way you are? I mean, something needs to, otherwise it can get boring actually and mechanical, and then that's not who you are as a coach.
Yeah,
So
and
I
the
feel
coaching definition is about it being a creative process, right?
absolutely right. So, what is the creativity we are bringing into our lives as a coach, or is it
Hmm.
only for clients or in a session? So, I feel, a few things that I feel would help is, every coach has to have a coach.
Hmm.
So you work with a coach for your life challenges, for your life opportunities, for your personal and professional growth, right? We talk about, if we say that coaching is about personal and professional, maximizing personal professional potential, doesn't that apply to us as coaches too? So that is
Yeah.
one. Second thing is, get yourself a supervisor to, especially for handling these kind of issues of, okay, there is a fatigue that has set in, there is a kind of boredom that has set in, but I don't want to acknowledge it because I'm like, how can I be bored, right? I should not be bored or stuff like that. But that's the reality and that's my humanity. So get a supervisor, get a coach. So now you have your support structure, and then keep working on yourself. You do your journaling if that is what works for you, do your self reflective practices, and keep all these things in place to, not just for increasing your skills and knowledge, but also for refreshing yourself, for reinventing yourself, and for re-energizing yourself.
Yeah. What's also when you talk about keeping ourselves fresh and creative and innovative, I also see that a lot of these coaching competencies, listening and curiosity, as coach, sometimes, just like we say, education spoils curiosity in school education, I think somewhere after a while coaches stop being curious. What's happening in the world, what's changing really. AI, so is it, how is it going to help me or impact me? I think that curiosity could also be a great asset to coaches in terms of developing.
Yeah. So that's an interesting paradox, right? On the one hand, you're learning, but on the other hand, you need to unlearn and relearn new things, right? And only when you're doing that, you're going to be having some curiosity happening, remaining fresh. Otherwise, you're going to get into a zone of, I know everything. There's nothing
Hmm.
to be curious about because there's nothing new. Or you might get into a complacent zone and you may go into denial, saying all this AI and all is there, but it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And those are risky, and yeah, those are dangerous waters. So you don't want to go there, and therefore you need your support structures.
Right. Learning versus unlearning. Great. Thanks so much for that. And when you started with coaching mindset, ICF emphasizes on coaching mindset. Especially, they talk about continuous learning, ongoing reflective practice. So,
Yeah.
any closing thoughts, Rekha, on what we spoke about, and what would be your kind of a mantra for coaches to keep learning and developing?
I think if you want to be a coach and if you want to show up as a coach in your life, right, and that doesn't mean you should go around without permission coaching people in your life. Don't do that, okay? But if you want to imbibe or live the principles of coaching or the mindset of coaching, you need to keep all these things in place. You need to work on yourself, you need to build a support structure for yourself, you need to keep yourself awake and alive, and be willing to stand in I don't know, be willing to learn, unlearn, and be curious.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Rekha. I think 20 minutes was too short a time for this conversation, but
True.
you wrapped it up wonderfully. So,
Thank
thank
you,
you so
Manish.
much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Bye bye.